What's up, guys? Justin here with the SketchUpEssentials.com. So in today's video, we're going to check out the new features contained in the newest version of Twinmotion, version 2025.1. Let's go ahead and just jump into it. Okay, so you can check out all of the new features contained in this version by going to the Twinmotion 2025.1 release notes page. So there's actually a blog post and a detailed release notes that I'll link to both of them in the notes down below. But I wanted to talk about some of the highlights contained in this newest version. And so the first thing you're going to notice is they've redesigned the environment tab on the right-hand side, and in doing so have given you access to a couple of awesome new features. And so you can see how now within your environment settings, you've got the option to swap between a dynamic sky and an HDRI image right here. And so you can pick between the dynamic sky and the HDRI image. You can't use both of them at the same time right now. So it's going to be one or the other, which is a little bit of a big deal because the dynamic sky contains a lot of new features for creating things like volumetric clouds and making those adjustments, which we're going to take a look at in a second. But right now you can pick between the two of them right here. If you want the dynamic sky, you click on this. You want the HDRI, you can click on this and then scroll down and you can adjust the HDRI that you have in the background down here. Now note there is an option up here for environment presets, which we'll take a look at in a second. That's basically going to allow you to save your own environmental settings associated with the dynamic sky. Now, the biggest thing that they've changed and added in this version is they now have volumetric clouds that look amazing. So within the dynamic sky, what you can do is you can scroll down. Notice how you've got your sky settings here. There's the setting for the typical 2D clouds inside of Twinmotion, which we've had before, and honestly, they just weren't really all that good, right? They were just kind of limited. You know, you could make changes a little bit with the slider, but they weren't great. However, if you toggle over into volumetric clouds, notice how you get a different set of sliders in here. And so the cool thing about this different set of sliders is notice how these are actually like real-time volumetric clouds. Like they're actually made up of 3D geometry. You can kind of see them clipping through or interacting with the mountains in the background over here like this. Now notice how there's things you can do, like you can adjust the height of the clouds right here. One of my favorite things about these volumetric clouds is they actually affect the sun. So notice how if I make this denser right here, it's going to block the sun and you're going to get less harsh shadows in here, just like this. So this is actually affecting the way that the shadows look. So if I bring this down like this, notice how the sun is actually going to shine through more, just depending on where those clouds are and if they're blocking the sun or not. Now there's a ton of different options in here for things that you can do to these. So for example, you can give them kind of a flat bottom if you want to do that. Let's go ahead and crank these up so we've got a little bit more right here. But you can give them a flat bottom. You can set how tall they are vertically. You can set the scale of the clouds right here. Note that there is an option over here for a random seed as well. So if you want to randomize the clouds, you can click on the little button right here for random seed in order to do that. Now take note of the number that's in here. So 808679. So if you want to get back to something, you can just type in 808679 and you'll get that same view right here. So it uses a randomization in a way where you can actually get it back by picking that number again, like this. Now there are a ton of options for other things that you can do in here. Like for example, I could bring the scale down, we could bring the amount down, but notice how you can add like cirrus clouds up above. So there's multiple different kinds of clouds. And so again, these are true volumetric, which is cool because let's say that we were to go to fly speed, right? And we're going to go way up right here. You can actually get into the clouds right here, which obviously this scene isn't really set up for that. But if you get into the clouds like this, notice how you're actually kind of like flying through these clouds. You can actually be up above them right here. So if we brought the vertical extent down like this, notice how you're actually above the clouds. So they exist in that 3D space. And there's options for adjusting dissipation as well, like this. So just a ton of options for working with these clouds. Now, one of the other things that I think you're going to use a lot is the presets. So notice how we've been kind of like messing around with these in order to try to get the clouds that we want. But notice how there's an option for clouds preset in here. Well, if you click on this, you can switch between different cloud types and then you can adjust those. So if you wanted like the nimbostratus clouds, for example, you can just put those in here using this, and then you can adjust the seed in order to adjust where they are in the sky. So if you wanted kind of a stormy look or something like that, this actually does a really good job of that. But you can actually pick those different clouds in here and then switch between them as kind of a starting point. Now, say that you have something you really like, right? So say that you have like a super dense foggy scene or whatever that you wanted to keep. So you could crank these clouds up like this. You can click on the button right here in order to save that. And then you can rename it. So you can just click on the little dot right here and just say foggy right here. And then you can access that later, which is really great. If you want to adjust it, you can make changes, and then you can click on the little button for adjust right here, and it'll adjust the preset. So you can save those cloud presets. Note that you can also save environment presets. So like, for example, say that you wanted an environment preset where everything was really kind of foggy. So we're going to set this with the fog, and we're going to look at the fog in a second. But they've made that feature a lot better as well. But say you've got something where the fog is really dense, it's got a really high height, and maybe you wanted to change the color of the fog a little bit. So something a little greener right here, like this. So say that you like this scene for whatever reason, you can actually save that entire environment preset right here. And we could just call this foggy green, which you may or may not want this, but you can save that as a preset, which you can access later, and you can click between, which is super cool. So, and if you do want to make any adjustments to that, so say you didn't like the green, say you wanted it to be a little bit redder or browner like this, you can just click on that update button in order to update that preset. But you can access different environment presets really quickly using these presets right here. And I highly recommend that you build off of the ones that are already in here, because they've got a really cool collection, right? They've got kind of a lunar surface, which is super interesting, by the way, in the way that it kind of interacts with your sun and everything like that. And so one thing I did want to point out from the release notes is you should consider these volumetric clouds to be basically experimental when it comes to the path tracer, meaning this all works really well in the real time. But notice how as soon as I toggle over into the path tracer, it's not really like rendering out the foggy look in here like this. And you may get different results depending on if you're using the, depending on the different kinds of clouds that you're using. But notice how like these stratus clouds don't really show up in here. So this is considered kind of experimental when it comes to the path trace mode as opposed to the real time mode. So just something that's worth pointing out and paying attention to is you might almost consider this a real time only feature at the moment. Still a really cool feature, but definitely worth noting. And so one thing I did want to highlight, and you might remember this, so in the past, the fog settings in this environment haven't been like super great, right? They've been kind of okay, but it was hard to really get any kind of like actual decent looking fog in your scene. Well, now they've really improved the fog settings in here. So notice how as we bring the density up, so the density is kind of bringing or adding more fog to the scene. But then if you bump the height up, then it's going to give you more fog kind of overall, right? So this affects the denseness of the scene, and then the height I would almost consider to be like a multiplier in here. But notice how this does just like a way better job of allowing us to do the fog in the scene now. So this is a significant improvement over the way that the fog worked in the past, and I think it's going to allow you to create a bunch of different kinds of scenes that you couldn't necessarily create before. And I really love this effect that's coming off of the water right here in real time, by the way. This actually looks really good. I have no clue if that's a new feature or not, but I love that it's doing that. And so they've also added a really cool feature designed to help you visualize different options. So configurations basically allow you to create different visibilities for different things. So for example, say that I wanted to create something that's a material switch right here. So basically I've got this set up where I can create a second configuration of a material like this. So I've got kind of a red leather material in here as my second option. I can click on the little button right here and I can toggle between those different states. So not only does that work right here, and you can create different triggers and other things like that, which, by the way, this is going to have to be a whole separate video because there's some really cool opportunities for this. But not only do you have the ability to adjust things like materials, you've also got the ability to adjust things like geometric options and other things like that. Okay, and so say that we wanted to create a configuration with the door opening right here. So what we could do is we could set this up as a properties animation. This is going to be our state one. Well, notice how they've got this door set up with an animation or a rotator in here. So if I click on the play button right here and then add a configuration right here, what we're able to do is we're actually able to set this up between the different configurations right here. Notice how that button is going to do that same thing where it's going to open that door and close it. Now, one thing that's cool about this is within the configurator itself. So when we click on this, notice how you can put that trigger as a 3D object right here, and you can actually place it on the door, this object of this car right here. So now this configurator is actually going to work when you click on the button inside of the scene right here. So lots of cool stuff you can do with this. This needs its own tutorial, which I can put something together, but very interesting being able to show different options in here. And remember that you can toggle between those different options as well. And I could set this up with a better thumbnail if I wanted to, but very powerful feature. So within the lights, they've added a new projector object. Whoops, we want to go to lights, projector light right here. So what the projector light is going to do is it's actually going to project the light on a surface. So if we take this, rotate it right here, notice how we're able to adjust the scale of the projection, that kind of thing, but you can also set a video. And so say we added a short in here. This is just one of my shorts from this channel, but notice how this is actually applying this to that surface. And you can move forward, backward, adjust the scale, adjust your aspect ratio, really whatever you want inside of this tool. So that's super interesting as well. You can also mask it out if you want to mask part of this to make it into a shape or something like that. And so I'm not sure what the intention is with the haze. Like this result right here doesn't look super great, and it doesn't look super great when you do the path tracer as well. So I'm not sure what the intention is with that. I do think that's kind of an interesting idea overall. So if you do want to add some sort of a visual haze or something like that, this could be a cool tool for that. But just the projector light itself is a pretty cool feature. And so in your library, they've also added a new object under particles for confetti. So you can add different kinds of confetti into your scene. So when I drag this in, notice how it's going to start dropping confetti particles in my scene right here. You can adjust things like the size of that object, right? So you can set if it's shooting it up and down. You can also adjust the size right here, and you should be able to set the length and the width as well. So notice how as you make this bigger, you can actually set this to have a larger footprint of confetti right here. So these particles are coming into the scene. Now note that the particles don't really interact with things in your model, right? It's not like a physics simulation or anything like that, but you can use this to drop this into the scene. Now there are some different presets in here as well. So if you get this kind of set up and you don't want to drag a new one in, you can pick some of these other objects in order to switch between the different parts, right? So you've got your different presets in here like this. So kind of a niche use, but it's actually a pretty cool feature. It actually works really well, and it's really easy to work with if you do want to drop confetti into your scene for whatever reason. Okay, so another cool performance saving enhancement they've added, and this is something that you can find over in the object settings over here for your static mesh actors, is this automates LOD setups now. And so what LOD is it's basically a level of detail. And what it's doing, and you can't really see it, it's really hard to kind of demonstrate in a video. You can kind of see a little bit of a flash around the leaves. When you start getting closer, you can kind of see it right here. Basically what happens is at a certain distance, this is going to automatically swap out a lighter weight model for the heavier weight model that are in here. So if you have like heavy mesh models that you bring in, like I brought this in from Polyhaven, which you can do, and I'll show you how to do it real quick. So say that you wanted to reduce the polys on this tree trunk object right here, because this is broken into 3 objects. So what you can do is you can just click in here and you can set it with a simple, normal, or complex LOD setup. That's just the number of LODs it'll create. But if I click on apply, it's going to go ahead and automatically generate that. And so what that's going to do, and again, it's really difficult to see, but it's going to set this up where at a certain distance, it's going to swap out that lower poly object. And you can go into the model, or you can go into the settings right here and you can adjust this, right? So notice how I can adjust the sliders in here, and that's going to affect the way that those LODs are going to work. And you can go ahead and you can click on the apply button when you make that change right here, and it's going to regenerate those LODs. But this can be a huge performance saver for you in the future. And because we've done this once, I'm pretty sure if we click in here, we're going to make this an instance right here, but I'm pretty sure that this object should also have those LODs automatically set up when you make a copy. Okay, so another feature they've added in the rendering settings is if you go into your ambiance right here, notice how sometimes when you're rendering real time like this, and then you switch to path trace, you get a difference between the different shadows, right? So like, for example, your real time shadows, and this more happens when I back up like this, but notice how those real-time shadows aren't as accurate in here. There's a setting in your shadows in the real-time settings for accurate shadows right here. When you do that, now notice how those are a lot more accurate in the 3D space. And so if you're getting some detailed shadows like this that aren't really showing up the way that you'd like for them to, you can try toggling between standard and accurate. And you can also adjust things like the sun bias in here in order to try to get more realistic settings in here. But if you're looking for some more like fine detail on those shadows, that accurate shadows setting can make a big difference. Okay, so another new feature that SketchUp users are going to like is if you've ever run into this issue before where you've got back sides of faces and front sides of faces like this. So the old way of importing those is Twinmotion would only recognize one face, right? So if I imported this file right here with the old settings, what would happen is this would get brought in, right? And you wouldn't see the face in the middle, but you'd see it on the back side because that was the direction that that object was facing, right? So that was problematic because if you get a bunch of like 3D warehouse models or something like that, you wouldn't get very good results. However, there's now a new little checkbox that you can check called two-sided geometry. When you click on import now, we're going to bring this in. Notice how now it picks up that geometry on both sides like this. So you're not dealing with that front and back face issue anymore, which can be a massive time saver when it comes to like cleaning up those 3D warehouse models to bring into Twinmotion. And so you might have noticed a little modeling box that's in here, right here. That's going to allow you to select an object and actually affect things about the object inside of the 3D space. Now, this is mostly for like model cleanup and stuff like that. I would not recommend trying to do this to change a bunch of geometry. I'd do that in your 3D modeling program. But if you have something you need to change in Twinmotion, like for example, say that you wanted to get rid of this face, and we'll go over here so that you can see this, but notice how there's an option to edit faces. And what you can do is you can go into a selection mode. So like this, for example, you can click on the option for delete. And in this case, there's two faces in here. So we're going to delete them again. But notice what that did, and it's a little hard to see, but you were able to actually come in here and edit and adjust that geometry like this. So you can just do a shift click and you can pick up multiple different pieces of geometry in here like this. You can click on delete in order to remove them. So you can use this in order to get rid of geometry directly inside of Twinmotion itself. It is a little bit limited, so you can adjust things like the normals, which I think is pretty valuable. So you can pick up things and like flip the normals of faces by clicking on them. So that just flips the direction that those faces are facing if you want to do that. So notice how you can do normal adjustment in here on your models, which can be valuable when you're dealing with imported models as well. So you can do a little bit of model adjustment using the tools in Twinmotion 2025. So architecturally, a change that I'm really excited about is they've really improved the way that this renders in your orthographic views. So if we go into a top view in real time, for example, notice how now this is rendering out really well. Everything looks really good. Previously, you kind of had to switch into a path traced view, but now this gives us the ability to quickly make these changes and adjustments inside of the real-time rendering engine instead, which allows you to create those views that architects really want and need. So like the elevations and the orthographics and other things like that. So significant improvements from that standpoint, which is really going to affect the results that you can get. And so I feel like this video is getting a little bit long, but there's other things they've adjusted too. Like for example, they've improved the wind feature inside of the program. So now the wind is going to affect vegetation assets as well as it can affect some cloth or drapes and curtains and things like that. So you can use the wind on things like that inside of your renderings. So that adds that extra level of realism, which is really cool. And then the other thing I wanted to make sure that I at least highlighted is they've made some changes to the camera animation functions. So there's a new orbit rig camera that can orbit around a central point. So that allows you to create these really cool 360-degree views as well. So highly recommend that you read through this whole thing because there's a ton of other things in here as well. So I love that they're adding so many features that I don't even have time to talk about them in a video, but we've got additional tree species. We've got triplanar mapping to help with messed up UVs and materials, as well as other things as well. So definitely download this and give it a try and also read through the release notes. All right, so I'd love to hear from you in the comments down below. What's your favorite new feature in this version? I know this is a pretty big one. As always, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this, and I'll catch you in the next video. Thanks, guys.